But Saudi leaders have made clear that normalization isn't possible without, quote, irrevocable steps toward a Palestinian state. U.S. officials hope a pause in the fighting and hostage deal could lead to progress on larger issues: reconstructing Gaza, reforming the Palestinian Authority, developing Gaza governance, and finally, normalization in two states. Now we get two perspectives. Aaron David Miller is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and a longtime State Department official in both Democratic and Republican administrations. And Khaled Elgindy is a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, where he directs their program on Palestine and Israeli-Palestinian affairs. He's participated in previous Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Thanks very much, both of you. Welcome back to the NewsHour. Khaled Elgindy, let me start with you. Let's start with what's on the table right now, and this is the Hamas hostage deal. So far, Hamas has refused any deal that doesn't say the words permanent ceasefire. This deal does not have that. Is it still possible, do you think, to get a Hamas-Israel hostage for pause deal today?
I think it's possible. I think what Hamas will look for, short of exactly those words, will be some assurances that a temporary pause would be treated as an effective ceasefire. So if they can get those kinds of assurances from the United States in particular, then I think Hamas could be persuaded to go along.
Aaron David Miller, this is a longer pause in the American nomenclature than we've had in the past. Could that 6-week plus pause become effectively a ceasefire?
Frankly, I think the Israelis will be operating in Gaza for months to come, even if this hostage deal actually materializes. And whatever commitments the Israelis make to a permanent, quote-unquote, ceasefire, I think all bets are off. They're determined, I think, to identify, find, and eliminate key Hamas leaders that were responsible for October 7th. So I think it's possible. You make it a break. How long that break will be and whether it can be turned into something more permanent is another matter entirely.
Khaled Elgindy, let us zoom all the way out. The pot at the end of this rainbow, as I said, is Saudi-Israel normalization, what the Saudis are now calling irrevocable steps toward a two-state solution. Is that possible with the Biden administration as mediator and this Israeli government?
I think it's certainly possible that the parties, the Saudis, the Israelis, the Americans, could strike a formula that works for the three of them. I'm not sure that it will be meaningful in the end, but it might be enough to persuade all sides to, attach their names to it. I think the problem isn't with getting people to accept a state. Even Donald Trump had a plan for a Palestinian state at the end of the day, as devoid of meaning and sovereignty as it was. I think what would be far more useful is if the United States in particular were talking about laying out a clear plan for ending Israel's occupation, both in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and Jerusalem. If the plan were focused on ending Israel's occupation, then it would be much more meaningful. But as it stands, sure, statehood, a Palestinian state, two-state solution, these are throwaway lines that have been agreed to and ignored in the past.
Aaron David Miller, should the U.S. be more focused on Israeli occupation than talking about two states?
Well, any meaningful commitment to Palestinian statehood by an Israeli government that was serious about negotiating a deal and a Palestinian partner that was serious as well is going to must bring about the end of Israel's occupation. I do agree with Khaled that I think such a deal is possible. I'm concerned about it. I think we risk overpaying the Saudis in bilateral coin, mutual defense treaty. I don't think we've concluded one with any country since the 1960 U.S.-Japan treaty was revised, giving the Saudis access to American nuclear technology without allowing them to control the fuel cycle. That's a huge blow to our proliferation policy. And I also worry that in the end, whatever commitments the Israeli government makes is not going to lead to irrevocably to a serious negotiation. Palestinians have to produce a partner. Israelis need to be serious as well. Then we can start talking. I don't think Israeli-Saudi normalization is the key to ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
That outside-to-in strategy has been continued by the Biden administration. It was started by the Trump administration. But pick up, Khaled Elgindy, on that point that Aaron David Miller made about a Palestinian partner. Is there a Palestinian partner, and is there a quote-unquote revitalized, to use Tony Blinken's word, revitalized Palestinian Authority? Is that possible?
What's more important than a revitalized Palestinian Authority is to have a revitalized Palestinian leadership. Whether it's a Palestinian Authority is irrelevant. What Palestinians need is a national leadership, and that speaks for all Palestinians, both inside and outside the occupied territories. That we don't have. Mahmoud Abbas is not that leader. He has been parochial, he's been ineffective, he's been weak. I think it is possible to imagine a different Palestinian internal political configuration, but it's something that Palestinians have to do on their own. But I would add to that leadership equation the United States. The United States has not been an effective broker. It has not managed this crisis well. It has actually taken, I think, very reckless decisions from the get-go, giving Israel a green light with no red lines of any sort. And we are now 4 months into this horror in Gaza, and they sort of painted themselves into a corner. So we also need a credible American leadership that understands and has empathy for and the ability to connect with people on both sides. Right now, the Biden administration has only managed to show humanity and empathy for the Israeli side.
Aaron David Miller, is there a version of the Biden administration policy that would be less, quote, reckless, less painted into a corner, and more empathetic?
It'd be really, really difficult. The empathy part, I think, is sadly lacking. This president clearly has an emotional attachment to Israel. He has a high regard for the people of Israel, the idea of Israel, the security of Israel, not so much, obviously, for the current Israeli prime minister. But I think that lack of empathy is important. As to whether the United States could be a credible broker, we're facing probably among the most consequential elections in American history. And the real question, I think, for the administration, since governing is about choosing, is whether in this kind of an election year, this administration is prepared to be risk ready when it comes to Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking, not risk-averse. The Israeli-Saudi piece is the easy part. It's whether or not the United States can be a credible mediator, if in fact, and I don't think we're talking about this happening anytime soon, if you ended up with an Israeli-Palestinian negotiation. Last time, Camp David, I was there, didn't succeed. We were facing gaps that were way, way, way too large, but we also didn't take charge of the summit. We need to be credible. We need to apply honey when it counts, assurances to both parties, but we also are going to have to apply plenty of vinegar, disincentives. Nobody's ever going to plant a tree in your honor if you make peace between Israelis and Palestinians. It's a tough lift.
Khaled Elgindy, quickly though, is there not an advantage to having an administration that is talking to the Palestinians, unlike the Trump administration, and at least saying to the region, this is where we're going, this is, as I put it earlier, the pot at the end of the rainbow?
Yeah, if we're looking at things in absolute minimalist terms, sure. I mean, that's the bare minimum required, is the ability to talk to both sides. But it's more important to go beyond that and actually understand where the two sides are coming from. The United States has always struggled with trying to connect with, understand, have empathy for Palestinians. But this administration, I think, has a much bigger blind spot than any previous administration that I've ever seen.
Aaron David Miller, quickly, would Benjamin Netanyahu be willing to jettison his right-wing coalition if offered a deal that would end with normalization with Saudi Arabia?
I'm betting he's going to rely on what he knows, a right-wing Israeli government. If he goes for the deal, he's going to end up with new partners. And those partners don't have much regard for Mr. Netanyahu on trial for bribery, fraud, breach of trust in a Jerusalem district court. I suspect if he goes for this deal, far from it being his legacy, I think it's going to number his days.
Aaron David Miller, Khaled Elgindy, thank you very much to you both.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.